unbeatable.
What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Sodium285, and considering how this year is the 30th anniversary of the Power Rangers franchise, what I thought I would do is discuss with you my top 10 Power Rangers hot takes. I did a similar video like this, but for the MCU, where I discussed my top 10 MCU hot takes with you guys. If you're interested, you can check that out. But now, today is Power Rangers, and I know this is going to upset a lot of people, but that is what hot takes are for, to open a discussion, to see people's different perspectives on different properties. And remember, this is all just my opinion, so with that out of the way, let the controversy begin. Let's start with my honorable mentions to my top 10 Power Rangers hot takes. So my first honorable mention Power Rangers hot take is that I think Operation Overdrive is one of the best seasons of Power Rangers. If you've watched my channel before, then you already know that I've mentioned plenty of times that Operation Overdrive is actually what made me the Power Rangers fan I am today, because it was the first season I ever watched. And I loved it. It got me hooked on Power Rangers. I really liked the serialized storytelling and the characters. I enjoyed the Rangers a lot, especially Ronnie, Tyzon. I thought Mac was interesting. I will admit, I initially didn't take too much of a liking to Rose, but over time she's grown on me. And I like the supporting characters. I really like the heart. So you can imagine how heartbroken I was when I found out a lot of people hated Operation Overdrive and considered it one of, if not the worst season of Power Rangers. Now, more power to you if you think that way, but when I heard that, it's like I felt I was invalid as a Power Rangers fan. But now, I'm no longer 13 or 14 when I found out about that. I've grown up and I've accepted that I just have a different opinion. I love Operation Overdrive, and to this day, I still love it, and it's still one of my favorites. Deal with it. My next honorable mention hot take is that I think RPM is a mid-tier season. Now let's put things into perspective. RPM was actually one of the first seasons of Power Rangers I ever watched, and I liked it as a kid, but even as a kid, something felt off about it. It didn't really have the same magic that Operation Overdrive and Jungle Fury before it had for me. So I couldn't figure out why this one felt off to me, especially when I heard so many people raving about this season, calling it one of the best. And ironically, it took one of the worst superhero films ever made, Fantastic, to make me realize that with the "they're not powers, they're aggressively abnormal physical conditions" line, which was very reminiscent of the "that is not spandex, the material is a self-assembling nanotode" line. So maybe I felt RPM was maybe a little bit embarrassed of being a superhero show. Sometimes. I respect the ambition. It was trying to be massive in scale and be post-apocalyptic future like that. And obviously it was coming off the heels of The Dark Knight, this idea of gritty realism. But it couldn't help but feel that it was maybe a little bit embarrassing. Plus, some stuff just hasn't aged well for me. Like stuff I used to like, such as Ziggy, I find maybe a little intolerable now. And again, RPM is an okay season. I don't dislike it. It's just not one of my favorites. There's still aspects I like a lot, and I do appreciate the ambition. It's just one that I don't really care to rewatch, and I think I've found myself liking it a little bit less over time. But if you love it, I'm really happy for you. I think it's an okay season, just one that I don't go crazy about like a lot of people do. And the next honorable mention hot take is that I think Megaforce is one of the most overhated, if not the most overhated season of Power Rangers. Now, I've actually always been a defender of the first season of Megaforce. I thought it was a fun season. Yes, it can be a bit reminiscent of Mighty Morphin with the way you have the Red Ranger, the self-disciplined leader, the Yellow Ranger being the second best fighter, as well as being quite self-disciplined herself. The Black Ranger, very much a jokester. The Blue Ranger, the smart guy. Though Emma was pretty different from Kimberly, if you ask me. Probably the most notably different from the five. But even then, they do bring their own. Troy is a bit more of an introvert. Noah has some wittiness and snarkiness that, as much as I love Billy, he didn't have. Jake was more into football, which is what us in Europe call soccer. Gia, I would say, is nowhere near as calm and very feisty. And probably the most notable similarity between Emma is that she's best friends with Gia, the Yellow Ranger. But even then, I've always been a fan of the first season. Rock is actually one of my favorite villains in all of Power Rangers. I thought he was tactical and conniving and smart, and I've enjoyed the characters. In fact, I still maintain that Emma is one of the best Pink Rangers ever. I love Emma a lot. And as for Super Mega Force, I will admit I did have it initially in my bottom 5 seasons of Power Rangers just because I was disappointed like anybody else, like everyone else, when it first came out. But time has softened my opinion on that season to the point where now I consider it a middle of the road season. I think it's decent. Yeah, it does have its issues and it could have been better, but the characters are still charming. Plus, it was probably the last season to have relatively great acting from all of the cast members of the Rangers until Dino Fury. That's just my pick. I know Megaforce gets a lot of flack, but I think 10 years later, it's good. Especially the first season. I very much enjoyed the first season a lot. That's just me. So now that my honorable mentions are out of the way, get ready for my top 10 Power Rangers hot takes. Here we go. Number 10, I think Andros is overrated. Now, I like Andros, and I do like In Space, even if I think it's slightly overrated. Just slightly. Mostly because while I think the finale of In Space works as a finale to In Space, not really as a finale to the Zordon era. Mostly because it's Andros, a character who was literally introduced in Space, is the one to save the universe. It doesn't feel like as if it's bringing the Zordon era of Power Rangers full circle. Okay, that's mostly because Haim Saban screwed over all of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers as well as their successors, but that's besides the point. No, and I do like Andros. I think he is a somewhat interesting character. He has an interesting, tragic backstory, in which gives him layers. But is that enough for me to make me love him? Not really. I find him sometimes a bit too emo. Plus, the rest of the fandom is basically like, Andros this, Andros that. Andros is the greatest superhero ever. I don't think they've said he's the greatest superhero ever, but it wouldn't surprise me if some of them have taught it. Again, people, more power to you if you feel that way, but he's never been one of my favorites. He's a bit too emo. And to be honest, regarding the whole uh, love with Ashley, I kind of felt Ashley would have worked better with Zane. I felt they had better chemistry. Plus, Zane I found more likable, in my opinion. Look, if you love Andros, I'm really happy for you. I like him, but he's not one of my favorite Rangers or one of my favorite Red Rangers. And I do think he's pretty overrated just because of how much the fandom has hyped him. A good character, but not one of my favorites. Number 9, Dino Charge and Time Force are some of the most overrated and worst Power Rangers seasons. Oh boy, is this going to make me a lot of enemies, because I know for a fact that these are two fan favorite seasons for a lot of people, but for me, they rank towards the bottom. Why? Let's start with Dino Charge. Now, a lot of people like to credit this as what saved the franchise after Super Mega Force for them killed it, and I can understand. I wanted it to save it because at the time I too was very disappointed with Super Mega Force, even though now I've come around to it and appreciated it more. And unfortunately, Dino Charge did not save the franchise for me. If anything, it actually dug that hole even deeper. And the reason for that is that it just felt very unambitious, if you ask me. Yeah, you can argue the Rangers have layers, and some are charming, like Ivan with his fish out of water story, Koda with his endearment, And Tyler was cool, and so was Kendall. And I wanted to like Shelby, but I kind of found her whiny and annoying, and the romance between her and Tyler didn't really do anything for me. It was kind of predictable. Chase, I initially found him funny, but now I kind of find him a bit too cheesy, which is the whole thing with Dino Charge and Dino Supercharge. I find it way too cheesy to take it seriously. And then the villains were just extremely annoying and cartoonish. The Heckle and Snide were very on the nose and were just annoying villains. Yeah, you can argue they're layered, but the whole Heckle having amnesia, that's why he was evil. It's like, that's your excuse. You were doing so well. Why? Honestly, and the less said about the finale, which was absolutely weird, the better. And the acting was very much all over the place. Some was strong, like Brennan Magia, Yoshi Sudarso, and Claire Backwilder, but then the others were a bit too cheesy. And then we get Time Force, which is all the more a fan favorite season for a lot of people. However, I'll say this. There was a brief moment where Time Force had the chance to become a good season in its first episode, when Alex is dying because Rancic killed him, and he tells Jen to promise him that he won't stop until she captures Rancic. That had a lot of potential, but it did not live up to it for me, because then they did kind of a bit of a bait and switch and basically made the entire season about Wes, and then they antagonized Alex later on, which very much undermined that promise. And they basically made Jen defined by her relationship with Wes and Alex, which is a complete waste of the character. And it became one of those seasons that were very Red Ranger centric. And Rancic, you had a time machine. Couldn't you have invaded from any time period, not stick to just one or a few? Seriously, look, if you love Dino Charge and Time Force, great, but let's just agree to disagree. Number 8. SPD is the weakest season of the Disney era. I am well aware that SPD is apparently another fan favorite for a lot of people, and I'll say this, it's not in my bottom 5. It's just a season I don't particularly care about, and I think it has possibly the most unlikable Rangers of the entire Disney era. Yes, you can argue they're some of the most layered because of their tragic backstory, blah blah blah. But like I said, just because your characters are layered doesn't make them automatically good characters. They sometimes come across as either idiots or a-holes. And look, I get that, say, Kruger is a commander, but then, say, in the Dino Thunder crossovers, when they're like, you were the Power Rangers. We were specially trained to take down Grum's army. No offense, guys, but fighting dinosaurs is so last century, and that's an order, stuff like that. It's like, you're not the boss of them, and yeah, you're trying to preserve the timeline, but still. That, I think, was kind of showing too much pride on their part. And obviously, earlier when they're during a training session, Jack is like, I would have gotten him had Squad Leader done his job right. And Sky's like, well, for once we agree. And then Jack's like, now who is Squad Leader? That would be you. And I'm like, did nobody fill Jack in that Red is supposed to be the leader before? Like, are you guys bad at your jobs? And it kind of got a bit frustrating. Honestly, I would say probably the most likable Rangers are Bridge and Sid. Those are probably the most likable Rangers just because of how fun they are in the season. And also because Bridge returned in Once a Ranger, so he kind of has that advantage. And I kind of found Sky to be pretty boring. Again, he has a tragic backstory and layers, but again, that doesn't make him automatically a great character. Yeah, he has some character development, but I think they maybe made him a bit too unlikable at the beginning, that it was kind of too late. Look, if you love SPD, I'm really happy for you, but when it comes to the Disney era, it ranks towards the bottom. And you could definitely tell that Bruce Kalish, the producer at the time, was still trying to find his footing. Number 7. Matt is a better fit for Kimberly than Tommy. Now, don't take this the wrong way. I like the Tommy and Kimberly romance, I do. and I think it feels natural. There's a sense of innocence, and I always liked and I thought it was really sweet when Tommy fixed Kimberly's model for a float in the carnival. And no, I am not one of those Tommy Catherine shippers. I actually find that romance completely forced and one of the most forced romances, not only in Power Rangers history, but in superhero history in general. But at the same time, I think I really dug the chemistry between Matt and Kimberly in the comics, and I really like how during the time where Kimberly's parents were really fighting a lot and arguing a lot, Matt was her one sense of happiness once she had moved in. And their first dates went pretty badly, yet he still wants to go out with her. I thought there was a lot of great chemistry, and I still feel the chemistry to this day in the comics. So, even though I do like Tommy Kimberly romance, I think I'm more of the Matt Kimberly fan. You could call it the Kit ship, if you might. And as for Tommy, I think Haley from Dino Thunder would be a great fit for him. And Matt and Kimberly, they kind of give me a bit of Wanda and Vision vibes from Marvel, as well as a bit of Rogue and Gambit there. And I find it endearing and a sense of innocence and warmth. That's just me. If you disagree, fine, but I'm Matt and Kimberly all the way. Number 6. Samurai is the best of the Neo Saban era. A lot of people would say that Dino Charge is the best of the Neo Saban era, but as you saw, I respectfully disagree. For me, that is easily Samurai, and I think these 2 seasons of Samurai are wildly overhated. I honestly never got the hate, to be honest. And even though I liked RPM as a kid, like I said, something felt off, and it did somewhat diminish my excitement for the future of Power Rangers, for future seasons, even as a kid. And I initially wanted to give Samurai skip, but then I watched Samurai, give it a fair shot, and I think it reignited some of my excitement for future Power Rangers to the point where I was looking forward to the 20th anniversary, which was Megaforce, which at the time started out strong, kind of diminished, but I've grown to appreciate Super Megaforce. But anyway, back to Samurai. I really did not get the hate. I thought all of the Rangers were really likable. I actually think it had some of the best acting throughout the entire franchise, and I really like the story. Yes, it's not as serious or post-apocalyptic as RPM was, but it's also not as cartoonish or cheesy as some of the later seasons like Dino Charge and Ninja Steel were. And I think it had a somewhat good middle ground. And the jokes I think still hold up. All the Rangers are likable and you want to root for them. And I think the Nilox, especially Serrator, are great villains. So, and honestly, I think Super Samurai leveled the bar even more. And I think Jaden is honestly very overhated. I liked him, I liked his arc throughout. And Mike and Emily, I think, are some of the best romances in all the Power Rangers. So, I love Samurai. That's just me. Number 5. Dimensions in Danger is worse than Legendary Battle. 9 years ago, after Legendary Battle had come out, if you were to tell me that I would end up thinking that the 25th anniversary special would be worse than Legendary Battle, I would have that opinion. I would not have believed you. That's how disappointed I was with Legendary Battle. That I was convinced the 25th anniversary was going to be better, and I wanted it to be better. I really did. But unfortunately, Dimensions in Danger really disappointed me, and that's a shame, because I did think Ninja Steel started out well with its first season. Its second season, I have a bit more of a mixed to somewhat low opinion on. But I really wanted Dimensions in Danger to be good. But I ended up being disappointed, and I feel over time it's actually gotten worse, and it's actually made me look back at Legendary Battle more fondly. I don't know how that happened. Really, I don't. And I hate saying this after Jason David Frank passed away, knowing that Dimensions in Danger was his last appearance as Tommy, new footage and all. ever in Power Rangers, but I still stand by, and that's actually what makes it more disappointing. That this is how he went out, because he was planning on retiring from the franchise, and that is the way he went out. A very disappointing special. And I think my biggest problem is that the vast majority of the Rangers, except four, which were Tommy, Koda, Wes, and Gemma, were practically useless. Yes, the Ninja Steel Rangers tried to get the arrows, but then they failed, and then Tommy stopped the third arrow anyway, so they felt kind of useless. And it was Tommy, Wes, Gemma, and Koda who saved the other Rangers, and I didn't like how the other Rangers were utilized either. Especially as a big fan of Rocky, Trent, Antonio, Gia, TJ. That was really disappointing. Meanwhile, with Legendary Battle, I think I can look back. Well, I definitely think I still stand by the fact that it should have been a lot better. There were more epic moments that not made me like, great, it's Tommy. How many times have we seen him before? Meanwhile, in Legendary Battle, when he stopped and saved that boy with Saba, that was an epic moment. And when he removed his helmet, that was an epic moment. Heck, when all of the Legendary Rangers showed up, I appreciate that the writers were trying to make it epic, even if the execution wasn't great. And it didn't feel like as if they were trying to show that these Rangers are more important than others, especially when it came to the Legendary Rangers. It felt like a bit more of equal footing. Am I still mad that Mike and Emily didn't get any dialogue to work with? Oh, absolutely. But it's somewhat made me look back at Legendary Battle more fondly to the point where I wouldn't say I hate it anymore, or not even dislike it. And that is surprising. Now, with Once and Always existing, at least we do have the 30th anniversary, which was epic. I love Once and Always. But Dimensions in Danger, I think for the 25th anniversary, which is a quarter of a decade, it deserved to have been better, and this is what they gave us, which was very disappointing. If you preferred Dimensions in Danger over Legendary Battle, that's great. I wanted to feel that way, but I don't. Number 4. Aisha is a better Yellow Ranger than Tanya. A little disclaimer, this is not me attacking Nakia Burris at all. I think she's a very sweet person from what I've seen, and you should definitely support hers and Catherine Sutherland's channel, Power Rangers Playback. She is a very nice person, so I have nothing against her. I do not blame her for me not being the biggest fan of Tanya. And honestly, I wouldn't say I hate Tanya or dislike her strongly. I just don't really care for her too much. And that mostly has to do with the way she was introduced in Power Rangers, which may have been one of the worst introductions. As if I'm recalling correctly in Alien Rangers, she was a kid introduced in a previous decade and then came back to the future to be a ranger and then skipped out on a lot of her life, and then she's a teenager again now. And to be honest, I think with Justin having this kid like personality, mostly because he was still a kid, worked better. But with Tanya, it felt a little awkward and as if they robbed most of her childhood. And honestly, not to mention, a lot of the time, especially because then Tommy and Catherine got together, you often saw her hanging out with Rocky and Adam, which felt like not only was she replacing Aisha as a Power Ranger, but also in her life. Not to mention the fact that nobody remembers Aisha, or at least that's how Alien Rangers and Zeo portrayed it. Outside of the Rangers, that is. And look, I just didn't really care for Tanya. Again, I like Nakia Burris, and I wouldn't say I hate Tanya, nor would I necessarily say I strongly dislike her. I just don't care about her. She's not one of the worst Rangers all the time, but she's definitely not one of my favorites, and I never really cared for a lot of the episodes. She was just kind of a placeholder, and then she got replaced soon, and I liked Ashley quite a bit, so it's like she didn't matter. And I think Nakia Burris deserved better. As for Aisha, honestly, now this might be a bit of bias because I love Aisha so much and she's one of my favorite Power Rangers. But I think she was a very good Yellow Ranger. It also helped that the way, while I may have not liked the peace conference idea the best, I may have not loved it. It's better because at least we knew that Trini, Jason, and Zach were still out there, at least until Once and Always. But obviously, they killed Trini off for obvious reasons. Rest in peace to Trang. And I think Aisha really held her own. And I think she really embodied, while still being her own person, what a Yellow Ranger should be. Kind of this glue, but in a different way, as we saw in Stop the Hate Master Parts 1 and 2, which is actually one of my favorite episodes of Power Rangers of all time, and it was worthy of any Trini focused episode. I also liked When There's Smoke There's Fire, Harmony of Discordia, and Rita's Pita. I think those were strong Aisha moments, as well as When Is a Ranger Not a Ranger and Z Waves. And I felt, unlike Tanya, because another problem I had with Tanya is that it felt like she didn't really offer anything new. And she was kind of a mixture of Trini and Kimberly in terms of feistiness and skills. But Aisha had a very sassy and cheeky attitude, so I felt that was refreshing and offered something new, and she managed to be her own person. So I will forever defend Aisha. That's just me. If you prefer Tanya, that's fine. But for me, I'm Team Aisha all the way. Number 3. Rocky is a better Red Ranger than Tommy. Now, I do feel bad talking about this after Jason David Frank passed away, but I'm sorry, I'm still not the biggest fan of Tommy's tenure as the Red Ranger. I felt like it was an awkward fit, and I felt he kind of tarnished a little bit the name of the Red Ranger, and now thanks to him, we got a lot of Red Rangers who are kind of these lone wolf type personas. We saw it with Andros, who is a very popular character. We saw it somewhat with Jaden and Wes, and I think it worked with Jaden. As for Wes, you're going to see what I have to say about that guy. And I don't think that's really what the Red Ranger is about. And I never really got the sense that he could make a good Red Ranger. Because being the Lone Wolf was already a big part of Tommy's character before that. And especially when you get into Turbo, where he's hardly around. Especially then TJ coming along, and I actually thought he was a better Red Ranger than Tommy. And even as Zeo, yeah, he had some good moments, like when he was reunited with his brother, but it's not like it couldn't have worked in any other color Tommy was in, like green or white, or even Dino Thunder Black later on. As for Rocky, look, I know he gets a lot of flack saying he wasn't a good leader. He didn't fit the leadership role. He was a better Blue Ranger. He was more like a Blue Ranger disguised as a Red Ranger, which I think is a bunch of stupid criticisms. Now, there might be bias because, like with Aisha, Rocky is one of my favorite Power Rangers of all time. But I don't think being a leader is what defines the Red Ranger. It's more responsibility. And I think Rocky nailed the responsibility angle very well, just in his own way that was different from Jason. And you saw this very well in the Rocky Just Wants to Have Fun episode, which is a favorite episode of mine, like with Stop the Hate Master and Forever Friends and Sound of Discordia. And I've really liked Rocky's personality, how it was different from Jason's, how he was more relaxed, and I felt red was more his color. And I very much disagree that Zeo was when he came into his own. If anything, it actually felt like it was undermining Rocky from demoting him, not to mention in some ways, Adam kind of became second in command, so Rocky lost that too. And then Jason comes back, his replacement, so it felt like as if they were undermining Rocky so much, and I hated that. If anything, if I had to say Rocky eventually came into his own, it would definitely be in season 3, where there was no Jason at all. He got to stand on his own 2 feet, and honestly, and again, this is probably why Rocky and Aisha are two of my favorite Power Rangers of all time. Because, and why I mentioned Rita's Pizza as an example for a great moment for Aisha. It was also a great moment for Rocky because when Tommy was infected to eat a lot of junk food, it was Rocky and Aisha that got through to him and told him not to be tempted and remember what he taught his students about looking after their bodies. And I just love Rocky. Plus, I see a lot of myself in him. I can be a bit goofy and very friendly. So that's probably why I gravitate more towards Rocky. If you prefer Tommy, fine, but I'm Team Rocky all the way. Number 2, Mighty Morphin is not overrated. If anything, it's underrated. I have seen way too much hate towards Mighty Morphin in the past couple of years. A lot of people say it's overrated, how it's campy, how a lot of the other Power Rangers seasons take themselves more seriously, blah blah blah. And honestly, I actually think Mighty Morphin is underrated at this point. Why? Well, to the whole it's campy part, I have to say, so, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, not just the third one, all 3 of them are pretty campy, and people basically worship the ground those movies walk on. So, I really don't see why it should be a problem if it's campy. Yeah, I called Dino Charge out for being too cheesy, but it wasn't done in a charming way, and here's something that Mighty Morphin has that Dino Charge didn't, in my opinion. The majority of the Rangers, at least, the vast majority, are extremely likable. There is not a single one, at least during this era, that I would say I dislike. Yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of Kat and Tommy during Zeo and Turbo, but that's during Zeo and Turbo. In Mighty Morphin, they're pretty cool. Even Kat, who's probably my least favorite, but I still like her during Mighty Morphin. It's just a shame of what Zeo and Turbo kind of did to her. And that's the thing. The first thing that draws you to a franchise is the characters. And Mighty Morphin has such lovable Rangers. And they rank among some of my personal favorite Power Rangers of all time. Zack, Trini, Jason, Billy, Kimberly, Rocky, Aisha, Adam. And I like Tommy as both Green and White Rangers. And seasons 2 and 3 in particular, I think are pretty underrated. And I think they do a lot of great things for the franchise. I might actually do separate videos for each of those seasons in the future, seasons 2 and 3. And not to mention, I actually don't compare it to Raimi's Spider-Man. I actually compare it to Richard Donner's Superman. Yeah, it's light-hearted, but there was a sense of warmth and hopefulness and optimism to it. It reminded audiences that you can have a lot of fun. I actually made a whole video basically defending Mighty Morphin if you want to check it out, but that's my take. I adore Mighty Morphin. I think all 3 seasons are in my... Actually, all 3 seasons are in my top 10 favorite Power Rangers seasons of all time. Number 1. I think Wes is the most overrated Power Ranger of all time. This had to be the number 1 Power Rangers hot take for me, because people absolutely adore Wes and hail him as one of, if not the greatest Red Ranger of all time. As for me, he's actually one of my least favorites, and that is definitely going to make me a lot of enemies. Now, I've already spoken briefly about why I have a strong dislike towards Time Force, and Wes is a big part of that. I think that's the thing. Your love or liking towards Time Force will very much depend on how you feel about Wes. I did not like him. I found him annoying and pretty much the worst spotlight stealer. Like I said, they revolved the show basically all around him and antagonized people like Jen and Alex and even Eric just to make him look good. And I did not buy into his father-son relationship. It kind of got annoying. And they treated him like a hero, especially in the finale where it very much undermined the promise that Jen made to Alex when she takes off her engagement ring. It's like, how can we live our lives knowing their cost was his? Even though they were about to get their memories wiped of all of their time in 2001. I was like, was this written by a completely different person with a different vision? I don't know. I think the finale's an absolute mess. And they built up as if he's going to be the savior, and only for it basically being Rancic who makes a weird turn to the good side just because his grandson almost got hurt. It was just a weird finale. And look, the show and the characters were basically like, Wes this, Wes that, Wes is the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's basically what they were saying. And the worst part is the fandom has basically become Wes this, Wes that, Wes is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Look, if you love Wes, fine, but I really don't like him. And he was actually a big part of what drove me away from Power Rangers initially, because I just couldn't stand his mere presence anymore, especially after Dementia's in Danger, where, again, it felt like he too was stealing the spotlight there. And I feel like he's gotten a bit too much attention. And hence why I liked Rocky, Adam and Aisha for bringing me back. Again, if you love Wes, great. Me, let's agree to disagree. So there you have it, true believers. That is my top 10 Power Rangers hot takes. What did you think of this video? Did you like my hot takes? Did you hate my hot takes? And let me know what your hot takes of Power Rangers are in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. I might do a reaction to this. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe for more if you like my content. I talk Marvel, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, Sonic the Hedgehog, Percy Jackson, sometimes DC and Mario. So if any of that is up your alley, this is the place for you. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And remember, trust your own judgment, and hopefully I'll be back soon. Until then, Sodium285, out.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.